I will be reading from my very new, as yet unpublished translation of the 1946 novel by Tove Ditlevsen, For barnets skyld, for the child's sake. As you probably know, Tove Ditlevsen also wrote the Copenhagen trilogy. This novel is set on the backdrop of the Nazi occupation of Denmark, World War II, and centers on a four-way relationship web between the mother, Merete, her fiancé, Karsten, her ex-husband, Robert, and their preteen daughter, Birgit. In this short passage, we hear about Birgit and her new best friend. One day, a new student came to Birgit's school. Her name was Hanne, an unusually mature girl of 13 or 14, with narrow gray eyes, a large nose, and a wide, unattractive mouth with prominent canines. Hanne was immediately attracted to Birgit, who had considered her round-headed friend Lisbeth childish, dumb, and boring for a long time with all her talk about dolls and hopscotch. She doesn't understand me, thought Birgit. And Birgit immediately confided all her problems to her new friend, with the sense of not being able to contain them in herself for 1 minute longer. Hanne's parents were also separated. Hanne said her father was a famous actor, though she wouldn't reveal his name. But your eyes would get real wide if you knew. And her mother was a dancer who died from tuberculosis. Hanne lived with her aunt, whom she rarely saw, and she had a small bedroom all to herself, with slanted walls, plastered with pictures of film stars in all kinds of poignant poses. When I saw that picture for the first time, said Hanne, pointing up at Leslie Howard, who, colorized and dreamy, was staring down at the two girls. It was as if I were no longer a child. Hanne smoked cigarettes. Her aunt knew so many people in the resistance, and they got them from England. And she wore nearly adult fashionable dresses and made the entire class gasp with wonder and jealous indignation when one day Hanne came to school in high heels. She had the habit of licking her lips every other second to keep them moist, which men cannot resist, she said. And she often confided in Birgit that it didn't matter if a girl was ugly, as long as she had charm. And the whole class was agreed that this ugly Hanne was one of the most charming girls who had ever sat on a school bench, and everyone envied Birgit her top ranking. For Birgit, this was the infection that her receptive organism was waiting for. They were together almost incessantly, usually at Hanne's. For some reason, Birgit didn't want her mother to meet her new girlfriend. They sometimes put on Hanne's bright pink lipstick, and they rouged their cheeks with some pink paper napkins they stole from her aunt, which they spit on. Hanne studied Birgit and declared, "That makes your eyes bigger and brighter. No man can resist that." Hanne always had money and always had plenty of candy and goodies. Still, her invisible aunt kept a watchful eye on her. And when they went to the cinema, always to see movies that were forbidden for children, they had to make her aunt think that she was going over to visit Birgit, while Birgit added eagerly, "Right, and I'll tell my mom that I'm visiting Lisbeth." She did tell her mother that if she asked, but she rarely did. It was a little embarrassing for Birgit to admit that no one cared where she went, while Hanne had to be so careful. When Hanne saw a photograph of Birgit's father, she was speechless, and she just had to have that photograph too, hanging between the movie stars on the slanted wall above her bed. So Birgit lent it to her once in a while. "I can see him whenever I want," she said, which is much better than a picture. Hanne squinted her narrow eyes and moistened her lips. "He's a dangerous one," she said. "I don't think many women would be able to resist those eyes." Birgit had never thought about that before, and she felt proud of her father in a new way. "You should meet my mother's new boyfriend," she said, frowning with ridicule. "He's 9 feet tall and has red hair." Birgit forced a giggle through her fingers, but suddenly felt sad inside without being able to say why. She frowned again, bit her top lip, and said, "I have to go home now, or my mother will be furious." Thank you.
Before I start, Michael, I was just wondering because you made a big splash with the Copenhagen trilogy this last year, and that the book you translated for that is it's from the end of her life, and this is written near the beginning of her life, and so I'm just kind of wondering how that. If her prose really changed during that time and her concerns.
Well, what's really interesting about this book is that how interior it is. Whereas in at least in Dependency, the third book of the trilogy, we hear about all these dramatic events. You know, all of her marriages and her abortions and her addiction. Whereas in this, it's all about what's going on inside the characters and the intrigue between the relationships and the tension and the neglect and the expectations. And I just find it so incredible that she was able to be so fine in her wording of how people think and feel about one another at the age of 27. It just blows my mind that she wrote this book at such an early age.
Very cool.